The faculty that are interviewed, they're saying we need these international students here because without them, we wouldn't get tenure. We wouldn't be able to produce this research.
Every spaces discussion that I've been in the last few days, right, it eventually somehow goes down to the shortcomings of the K-12 education system that we have right now and how that's creating the shortage of STEM that H-1Bs are trying to fill in. Is there truth in that?
Oh, there's a lot of truth in that. America should be less like Harvard and more like Shark Tank, right? It's like we have very stereotypical sort of benchmarks of what we think excellence is. But I mean, entrepreneurs are risk takers and they don't always fit those profiles and never know where you're going to find or cultivate genius. There was a period of time where we temporarily increased H-1B visas and then that lapsed. And companies that were using H-1Bs offshored, I think, 14% more than companies that were not using H-1Bs. A professor from Kent State University found that temporary visa holders are on average 7.6 years younger than the average American worker doing the same kind of job in the same industry. Temporary visa holders, the majority of which being H-1Bs in his study, they have a 25% wage premium, meaning they have 25% higher earning than their base salary.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Area 51 podcast. Everything's been so exciting on X, Sanjay.
It's not like we got the entire world to talk about H-1B visa or something like that. But surprisingly, not the entire world, but close enough.
I'm sure everyone at the border is like, hey, wait a minute, what's happening, guys? Why is no one talking about us? But X is now turned into this immigration think tank with a lot of self-proclaimed experts. So to debunk a lot of false narratives that's been floating around, we actually got an expert who knows what he's talking about. So, Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you here, Sam. You know, we're big fans of your work, and it's exciting that you're finally here and we get to talk to you about this stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Sam, you want to give a quick introduction to our listeners on yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I've been engaged in immigration policy since 2019. I've spent nearly 5 years at a conservative advocacy group called Americans for Prosperity, advocating for pro-immigration policies on the political right from that Tea Party small government perspective, engaging with Republican congressional staff, a lot of Republican activists from all across these 50 states. Currently, I'm at the Economic Innovation Group, a very small think tank. I would call it an ideas lab based in DC. They specialize in economic geography and economic dynamism, and I'm promoting immigration policy through those lenses, specifically high-skilled immigration.
I wanted to ask, before Rahul gets to the meat of the conversation, what was your idea with, typically you would assume that the right or the center right are a little bit more conservative when it comes to immigration, but you've been on the opposite end of the spectrum, mostly focused on how immigration is a lot more, conducive to the US. So you were pretty clear on that as you, got onto this role and this career because it's pretty unique. I've seen a little bit more left-leaning think tanks that are, completely on the other end, open borders and going all the way up. And then we have David Beer, who's a little bit more on the libertarian side, but your focus and angle is very unique, I felt like. So, would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I learned about economics. I grew up actually being a Democrat. And the further right I got on economics and politics, the further, quote, left, because I started to understand economics better. And so, I started opposing things like raising the minimum wage and all those policies because my economic literacy went up. So ironically, my interest in immigration, started right before Trump announced his run in 2016. I was reading like F.A. Hayek, Milton Friedman, all those people. So I'm like, okay, I guess Republican is where I neatly fit. And then Donald Trump threw kind of a wrench in that a little bit. But, I still consider myself, a man of the right. A lot of my friends work at Republican think tanks, Republican staff. a lot of them do disagree with me, but that's sort of how policy change gets done, is you have friends with people who disagree with you on key issues. So.
You actually answered a question I was going to ask, because in your introduction, you're like, you work for a conservative think tank. And like Sanjay said, right, your posts are more left-leaning than... that was a question, but you already answered that.
I think to some people I come off as left-coded, maybe because it's primarily immigration related. You'll probably find some tweets that are non-immigration related, being against vaccine mandates and stuff like that. You can find that some. Occasionally, I'll talk about why I don't like teachers' unions and stuff like that. So I like Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor of Virginia. I'm actually a pretty normal Republican when we're not so deeply focused on the immigration issue.
So what's your connection with Kansas City? Are you from Kansas City originally?
Yeah, I'm in Kansas City right now, actually.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
We went to school near Kansas City. It was a small university in Rolla. Missouri University of Science and Technology.
That's where my little brother went to school, actually.
Yeah, both of us went to school there.
You guys went to Raleigh? Nice.
Yep, we did.
Nice, but also, I'm sorry, do you have that Long John Silver's there when you guys were there?
No. It was gone. Everything nice is gone. I don't know what people are eating there right now. When I was there were 3 restaurants. Now that's torn down too. We had one Thai restaurant and then one
there's
Denny's.
Alexis Pizza or something like that, right? There's this pizza place.
Very limited options. That was my first introduction to America, right? At 2016, I grew up in, like Sanjay, both of us grew up in the Middle East in Dubai. So I come in 2016 and I am in Missouri and I'm like, wow, this is America?
So our idea, our mental picture of every city in the US is like New York.
Did you have Mr. Runyon as a professor?
So we both went for grad school.
Okay.
So my major was very different. Mine was petroleum engineering, master's in petroleum, and I think Sanjay was systems, right?
Systems engineering, yeah. So it's probably industrial engineering with another name. That's so it's operations research, that sort of stuff.
But yeah, every time I see your tweets with Kansas City Chiefs, I'm like, oh, it's cool. Someone else from the Midwest. Nice. Because I support the Chiefs too. So.
Great. Yeah, they're a very easy team to root for right now.
I supported them for a different reason, because every time they would win near gas station, we would get half off drinks, and I'd just be hoping they'd win. It's just a goal. That's how I jumped on that bandwagon.
Yeah. Having a tech school like Rolla in such a remote area, though, that speaks to the value of a lot of immigration, is that, especially skilled immigration, you're bringing a lot of human capital to a place, even if it's temporary. International students are what keeps those places in business. So
exactly.
That's true.
Because there's so many posts over the last few days have been saying that, hey, let's limit the intake of international students. But what people don't understand is that the international tuition that we pay is so much more higher, right? And a lot of that money goes towards financial aid, scholarships, everything else, faculty fees, right? So there's a lot from our contribution in actually making sure that the universities are up and running. It's just so that more people can benefit from it. But unfortunately, no one ever talks about things like that, because there's in-state, there's out-of-state, and then right at the very top, the max amount is international. And that's what we all had to pay to come study here.
Yeah, it's Kevin C., one immigration economist. He did an estimate. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm giving a very conservative guess, but his impact is greater. I think for every 7 international students you have who are enrolled in a university, on average, they create about 8 or 9 additional slots for American students. Because of the outsized tuition that they pay, that gets funneled back into more revenue for the university. And some of that revenue does end up creating more space for domestic students to be enrolled. So it's a positive sum game. International students are not taking people's spots. They're creating spots. The faculty that they're interviewed, they're saying we need these international students here because without them, we wouldn't get tenure. We wouldn't be able to produce this research. The thing that I did post was that our universities are the envy of the world in STEM. Our K through 12 schools are the laughing stock. What's the big difference there? It's not like we're masterminds at knowing how to run a university. It's just that we have a lot of international students supply our university with talent, and talent attracts talent. So that's just, I think that's an isolated example of just the value that international students bring.
But why do you say that though, Sam? Because what you said was what Sanjay and I were discussing just when you called on, right? Every Spaces discussion that I've been in the last few days, right? It eventually somehow goes down to the shortcomings of the K-12 education system that we have right now and how that's creating the shortage of STEM that H-1Bs are trying to fill in. Is there truth in that?
Oh, there's a lot of truth in that, yeah. And it's easy to attack the K-12 shortcomings that we have. It's hard to figure out what the solutions are. The National Academy of Sciences did somewhat deep dive into this. They found like less than 4% of high school graduates end up in the STEM workforce, is what it is, which is still very shocking, though.
Yeah.
But the majority of U.S. undergrads who do STEM end up switching out of STEM after taking introductory courses. So those are weed out classes that weed out domestic students because they, for whatever reason, are not proficient enough. You have it may be less than half of schools. It's close to half or less than half of schools, high schools, or will offer like calculus and those kinds of courses. Our K through 12 institutions are not really equipping people. But the thing is that we want to be able to improve our K through 12 institutions to meet the prestige of our universities. We don't want to get rid of international students or cut international students to close that gap in the opposite direction. That's going to be destructive to do that. And so that's the challenge that we face. But the other fallacy that a lot of people are trying to popularize is this idea that we should not rely on the H-1B or these other skilled worker visas because we need to train Americans. And once we train Americans, we can get over this crutch that is the H-1B. That's the wrong way to think about it. If you have an educated STEM literate population, you're going to be a bigger magnet for foreign talent because you're going to have more industries and businesses pop up that are demanding that they collaborate with people from around the world. And so you're only going to whet the appetite further for more international talent. So it's completely backwards because what you're doing is we should educate our K through 12, domestic K through 12 population to know STEM, because when you do that, they become much more effective collaborators at bringing with international talent. And they know how to leverage that talent, that foreign talent, more effectively. This is not this dog-eat-dog world where people are competing for jobs all the time. It's also a team effort. When you look at how immigrants are outsized founders and co-founders of Fortune 500 companies, the key word for me is actually co-founder, because it's immigrants who help Americans patent more things. Like, immigrants are great teammates. Like H-1Bs, they increase patenting, but H-1B holders themselves often aren't the authors of the patent. They just increase efficiency for the team, make it so that the team is patenting more. Because H-1Bs, as we know, they're kind of on a leash as far as the occupations they can do. They're not really in a position to be authors of patents. They're just able to contribute in indirect ways that boost productivity that result in more patents. So,
like a team contributor, right? At that point.
Yeah, they help Americans patent more too.
Are there any data or any patterns between patent filings, startups, and immigrants?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but my current employer, Economic Innovation Group, I don't know if we have show notes, but yeah, they disproportionately contribute to patents, particularly in strategic industries like semiconductors. They make up a relatively small percentage of the population, but generate a lion's share of the patents.
So that myth that H-1Bs are actually stealing jobs, it's actually, just based on whatever Sam said right now, right? That whole narrative should not actually be used, right? Because just to sum it up, you've got around 4% or 5% was ready for a STEM field. You've got H-1Bs now there's like data, which we'll probably attach in our show notes, right? Who have actually significantly increased the contributions from an entrepreneurial side, which actually hire more Americans. Like narratives like this, and literally every conversation starts with two narratives, Sam. And Sandra, you probably know this. One is that we're stealing jobs, and the second one is that we're cheap labor.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Like, I feel a big part, like, in that, is today, like, it's typically been a thing against immigrants since like time immemorial. It's such an old story about whoever the newer group is coming. Before, I think the earliest thing we might go back is like the Irish moving into the US, after the the potato famine in the 1800s, and they're like, oh, no Irish jobs or whatever it is, and then it was the Germans, and then the Italians, and then the Chinese,
and
the
they were at the
Mexicans.
bottom, Sanjay. Like
Yeah,
a colleague of mine told me, like the Irish were at the bottom, right? They would do the jobs and no one else wanted to do.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And they're like, oh, they take the jobs for a cheaper rate or they get paid less. And today I feel like, this is just my thinking, is that because the US has become a lot more diverse, like it's not easy to like just point it at a group of people, but the H-1B, because primarily it's Indians, it's easy to like correlate, oh, it's a visa, like these are the cheaper labor that's coming in and taking all our jobs. So
I think that a key difference is that immigration, I think throughout our history, has always been a very hot button issue, but it was a hot button issue among both sides of the political aisle. You had anti-immigration Democrats, Republicans. You had pro-immigration Democrats and pro-immigration.
Oh, the Democrats were against immigration at some point?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Absolutely. It was famously or infamously Joe Manchin's predecessor in the Senate, Robert Byrd, stopped a lot of immigration reform from President George W. Bush. Bush wanted to do a lot of immigration reforms in like the 9/11 security package, for example. Robert Byrd said, no, that's a lot of nonsense. He's quoted like the Washington Times and Examiner as being against this stuff. You had Dianne Feinstein at some point talking about, the senator from California when she was still alive, talking about cheap labor and stuff like that. Going way back in the the Reconstruction era, the Republican Party platform was very, very pro-immigration. They wanted liberalized immigration because they knew it was Americans' competitive advantage. So, like the pedestal of Emma Lazarus may have well been the GOP's. It essentially was a GOP's platform back then. So the parties ebb and flow. They form different factions, and I mean, in a way, that can give you hope for the future. That maybe immigration won't always be so polarizing, or maybe it'll always be so polarizing, but maybe not so much on partisan factional lines like they are right now. So
it's become more limited to like, okay, one like entire party rather than like it was, you had on both sides of the aisle where people were pro and anti.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting, right? Like,
it's one of the good things of the podcast, Sanjay. It's like every time we have a guest, Sam, we end up learning so much ourselves. It's fascinating. It's like times like this, you're like, damn, I really don't know much about the immigration history of the country in the last many years.
There's a great documentary about immigration reform from, I think, the year 2000 to 2013, and it follows the same staffers, and you watch them age over time as they try to like get this done. And you get very candid, just like footage of people arguing with each other, insulting each other's bosses, sabotaging bills. Like when Jeff Flake from Arizona was still a member of Congress, he was trying to do a guest worker bill with a Democrat from Texas. He was on the phone with an AFL-CIO person and giving him all this poison pill language to just like stop this bill from happening, And,
wow.
This is all in the documentary?
Yeah, this is all in the documentary.
Oh, what's the name and where can I find this?
It's called How Democracy Works Now. You can find it on Vimeo, but it costs like $70 to rent and like hundreds of dollars.
Damn.
I don't know why it's so expensive. It's really useful though.
It's only for those dedicated to the cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to that second elephant in the room, Sam, regarding the perception that H-1B is a cheap labor, based on your research and the data that you have, is that a fair statement?
No, it's not. People say that because they're cherry picking. I mean, we all see this, what they're doing online right now, where they look at all the LCA data. They click. They order it so it's the lowest rated first. They screen cap that portion of it, and then they say, "Hey, is this acceptable?" It's like, well, maybe it's not acceptable, but like, this is like less than 1% of like the people who are getting these visas. This is insane. Like 3 or 4 people from 7-Eleven who are cooks or something who may or may not have been certified by LCA, DOL, and accepted by USCIS. It's completely misleading. There's a good study out. A professor from Kent State University, he found that temporary visa holders are on average 7.6 years younger than the average American worker doing the same kind of job in the same industry. And so on average, H-1Bs are earlier in their career than Americans are. And so once you take that into account and you adjust for age, temporary visa holders, the majority of which being H-1Bs in his study, they have a 25% wage premium, meaning they have 25% higher earnings in their base salary than similarly situated Americans do. So it's a complete myth that H-1Bs are cheap labor. Their median wage is over 120,000 per year, and some people are trying to even say that's cheap labor. And maybe that sounds low if you're a software developer in Silicon Valley. But the bigger thing that people aren't understanding is that base salary is actually a pretty small fraction for most of these people's total compensation. DOL should be including total compensation in there if you want an accurate picture, because they'd be making $400,000, $500,000, $1 million in some cases. Like that makes all the difference there when you're looking at this. Google and Amazon, they have generous stocks for their employees, and it really obscures the picture.
Yeah, and they also show LCAs of H-2Bs, and that's been floating around quite a bit too, and saying, hey, are these the H-1B workers we need imported into the country? And people are buying it, and that's what gets me, and it just bothers me so much when I see these, and they use them as talking points to drive home the discussion. And then you've got like people who with open minds who trying to understand it, buying that, and then forming an impression in their mind against the whole H-1B system.
Yeah, they don't have a time to understand. There's the smart person who maybe has time to look at this for 10 or 15 minutes and then send a tweet and then log off and enjoy their life, or focus on their other sort of policy issue that they're obsessed about. And that's the thing that you have to break through is, how do you show people the truth, especially people who are smart enough to digest the truth but don't have the bandwidth to do it. It is a difficult task to do that. The other thing too that I want to mention is that even if you're finding people who are like making $50,000 or something like that in the LCA data, oftentimes those are in locations where the median wage is lower than that still. In Springfield, Missouri, the median wage is like $38,000 an hour, and someone is like complaining, say, hey, this is a $55,000 a year job. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, look at what everyone else around is making. They're making like $20,000 less than this guy. So this is probably good for the local economy of Springfield that you're hiring this high income guy. Another really interesting point about the economic effects here is that to the extent that H-1Bs depress wages for white collar professionals, I mean, you have to think, what's the impact overall for the blue collar professionals in the workforce? You're making services like, for example, let's have doctors, for example. Let's say you take doctors, you scale up the supply of doctors in the area. What does that do? That brings down the prices of services because you have an abundance of doctors. So you increase the supply of doctors. Doctors have a lot of spending power, and they buy haircuts, they go to restaurants, and you're increasing the demand for all of these other blue collar services. And therefore, you raise the wages of those people in those blue collar industries. Greg Mankiw, George W. Bush's former economist, had a blog post about H-1Bs, I think 2 days ago, explaining how increasing skilled immigration actually reduces inequality because you increase the demand and therefore the labor market tightness of these blue collar jobs while increasing the abundance and reducing the cost of services for these white collar jobs. So even if you do make the argument that skilled immigration reduces wages for skilled Americans, it's like, well, why are you defending like the upper crust of society at the expense of blue collar?
We've spoken about H-1Bs and the impact into the tech sector, Silicon Valley, and all these tech giants, right? But is there an impact to the small businesses around, right? And you've hit the nail on the head, right? You've got people who bringing in more money. As a result, they're going to spend that, and then the money's going back into the economy, right? And then you're actually supporting the entire ecosystem around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And and you have this argument about how does this benefit the average American, which that's a common sense argument. That's a very kitchen table argument. But the other side of this too is the patenting, having as much innovation as possible occur on U.S. soil and just America's competitive advantage. We want as many people on our team as possible, not just the 0.01% of people. You want to build institutions around those people. I don't know if Albert Einstein would be able to do all that he could do without the top 5% and 10% of society around to create those institutions.
It's funny you say that because Elon's been using that statistic quite a lot, and I did have some concerns. Like, would everyone hit that bar, that 0.01% enough to actually gain entry? And are we doing more damage at that point?
I mean, like, if any, I don't think that Elon is wanting to hire the 0.001% in cases, because
exactly,
Elon Musk's competing with him. Like, he would want to hire like the top 1%, the top 2% of, and that probably is what he's hiring for the most part. So it's about creating institutions, enlarging our institutions that are generating the lion's share of our innovation. And frankly, the geopolitical imperative to beat China is something that is, I don't know if it's ever going to end. It's global talent it's going to be a never-ending race, and we're always going to be at the frontiers of finding paradigm-shifting technologies and making sure that that's not done outside of U.S. soil. It's within our own sort of regulatory structure on U.S. soil. We want Americans to be at the forefront of human innovation, because that's how ordinary Americans reap the benefits. If that's done on U.S. soil, that's where the jobs get created.
100%.
We're pretty much seeing an example of that, in the artificial intelligence sector right now. Like, I'm not talking not just about the high-end research and development, like those AI frontier models where you have these deep learning, really fancy computer science researchers, because now you have these companies building stuff. They need data centers, they need power, and now you're seeing that money already. All these large companies like Amazon, Microsoft, literally throwing billions of dollars into building data centers, power plants, restarting nuclear power plants, and there's an entire labor force that's required to feed into that and to support it, build it, maintain it, which is exactly what you want, right? Like, because that helps everyday Americans, it helps the economy go, and we're at the top. Like, it's exactly what he stated.
And like Arvind Srini was like a perfect poster boy for that after Elon, right? It's like Perplexity CEO on
yeah, exactly. I mean, for what it's worth, Elon itself, right? Like, he's the exact story of, like, your immigrant rags to riches being successful in the US.
His EB1 was denied. Can you believe it? His O1 was denied.
I know.
He wrote about it and I lost my head. I was like, I sold it for $300 million, my first startup, and I applied for an O1 or an EB1. I don't remember which one, and they rejected him. It was only until PayPal that it got approved, and I was like, the rest of us are like working with EB1 coaches to get featured in one newspaper to satisfy a criteria. Elon was rejected. You know what I mean? It's just
that shows that government central planners, are terrible at even identifying top talent. And I mean, I say it, somewhat jokingly, but actually not, that America should be less like Harvard and more like Shark Tank, right? It's like we have very stereotypical sort of benchmarks of what we think excellence is. And it's like, it's graduating from Ivy League. But I mean, entrepreneurs are risk takers, and they don't always fit those profiles. And you never know where you're going to find or cultivate genius.
I mean, the Zuck dropped out, for crying out loud, right? Like, you need to actually nail down the parameters on how you're going to judge people, which is why when everyone's like top 1%, top 0.1%, I get really skeptical, and I'm like, wow, we need to nail down our parameters to actually judge that to a perfect 10. Otherwise, we're going to screw up even more.
Well, at least top 1% or top 5% or something. Like give yourself more breathing room. Like,
yeah, exactly, right? Like, if you want to get like the top 0.01 percentile, that's probably like 100 people in an industry or something like that, right? It's because it's such a small number. Like, yeah, it's a lot to think about. Like, I actually, now that you say it, like this idea about like having more high skill immigrations, like spreading, for the lack of a better word, like the wealth among other industries like that are around them, like that. I've never even considered the economic benefits of something like that. Like that's pretty awesome.
No one does, right? Because everything is like, oh, we're stealing jobs. It's not like we're... At this point, if someone says anything nice to me on X from an H-1B standpoint, I'll actually physically take a flight to meet up with that person and give him a hug. It's like... it's reached that point.
Yeah. I mean, people follow talent, and if you're not bringing in more and more talent and constantly growing, then people are going to find out where the talent is outside of our borders, and they're going to offshore outside of our borders and build new data centers there instead of here. And there are plenty of reforms that we have to do, like permitting reform, to make us more business friendly. But being talent friendly is, I think, the most important ingredient for that. People are looking at our immigration system right now, and it's less about U.S. immigration policy, and it's more about global mobility. U.S. companies, instead of figuring out how can we retain our employees in the U.S., are like, how do we make sure that we can retain our employees at any of our offices? And I think that's a pretty troubling sign that companies aren't asking for services as much about just bringing them back to the United States. It's just about where offshore or in the United States can we bring them? It's like we want them all to be concentrated in the United States because the United States is generally where top talent is most productive. And if we lose that, then China is going to have a monopoly on a lot of different key strategic industries.
And you got to also remember, one of the problems with offshoring is, on paper, initially it may look like it's a much cheaper option, but you got to account for things like cultural and time differences, where it's so much more difficult to communicate things that you want to get done, or the interconnection is bad, or explaining how when you're having a detailed argument on how to do some sort of work. And then of course, if it's based out of India or the Philippines or something like that, there's like a 12-14 hour difference. So if you miss a day, you've spent 2-3 days again more just to get or back onto the right track. It's so much easier when everyone's there in the US, even if necessarily they are working remote, but they are in the United States geographically, So that's a valid point as well. That's so cool. I never thought of it like the immigration angle from that perspective. That's because I'm thinking offshoring is obviously not great because you're losing out jobs itself, but this we need to get people inside rather than putting.
But isn't that an eventuality, Sanjay? If H-1B is scrapped, offshoring is going to be 5x of what it is right now.
Yeah, the economist Britta Glennon at the Wharton Business School in Pennsylvania did a study on this, showing, because there was a period of time where we temporarily increased H-1B visas, and then that lapsed, and companies that were using H-1Bs offshored, I think, 14% more than companies that were not using H-1Bs.
Okay.
And so you are accelerating companies' tendency to offshore by constricting their supply. And again, we want as many of these industries in the United States because they're governed by our regulatory regime. Whatever security risk people are saying about espionage and stuff like that, imagine the security risks of building data centers outside the U.S. near different security. It's with other governments, are you serious? How do you not see the other side of the coin here,
So in this race for global talent, Sam, are there any countries in your perspective have nailed down their immigration policies to keep it easier to attract talent? A country that we could learn from potentially?
Every country has their own strengths and weaknesses. There are a lot of countries that I think Singapore make it easier to... it's a more family-friendly immigration policy when it comes to skilled immigration. Spouses are able to work more easily. Children are able to work more easily. Everyone's status isn't so tenuous. But I don't think that we found really a great formula for any country yet. Canada tries to do a points-based system, and I think that's been relatively successful given the size of Canada. They're such a small... they're smaller than the state of California, number one. But I think that Canada does extremely well for what they have.
But they're using Canada's failed immigration model to state that that's what US is looking at if they actually become more friendly towards skilled immigration. Is that a concern?
I think that if we adopted Canada's immigration model, it'd be an improvement overall. They have a lot of fast track options for people who meet certain metrics like age and level of education. But The problem, though, is that they have this parliamentary system where it's very easy to adjust through their own executive branch what the criteria need to be as a labor market rapidly fluctuates. The United States does not have that kind of system. Policy is driven by Congress, and we have a lot less executive branch regulatory flexibility to have a system like Canada has. And so it's just kind of incompatible with our system of government. And I don't think it would really work unless you really amend a lot of things. Having a system, I think, that would look at people not based off of employment, but based off of maybe they have an initial job offer or that offers a high salary but then is also age adjusted. But then once you get that visa, you're able to switch employers. That would be sort of my ideal, is rewarding the young high earners. You're not tied to your employment. Your job offer is just your ticket in the door. I think that would be a great system. I think that if you're an entrepreneur, you can maybe use your earnings histories, or we can audit your investors and stuff like that, and you can get in that way. Maybe your startup doesn't work, right? But you have the attributes to be successful and get hired, like those kinds of things we could maybe have a system constructed around.
So these are very valid points, Sam. Does USCIS actually partner with like think tanks like yourself to actually say, hey, what should we do to make this better? Or does it like work in a silo? I'm just curious.
I think it works in a silo generally. For all of like the grievances people give USCIS, and I would give them a lot of grievances, we have some pretty smart people currently manning the helm there that have made a lot of, I think, headway in helping to expand premium processing. Congress passed a law to expand premium processing, but USCIS has been using the parameters of their authority to speed that up. The auto renewals of work permits, it's an archaic system. I'm not sure. Maybe the unions at USCIS are causing a lot of gridlock right now. I think they don't like automation because it disrupts their work, and so that's a big problem. But agencies and government workers, they generally they're not very responsive to change. And so I think that concepts like Doge are necessary because they help provide a challenge for that.
I mean, it takes 40 months to get an approved I-140. That's ridiculous.
It's insane. And the other issue is that USCIS, it's, I think, 97% fee funded. And the 3% that's not fee funded, I think, is E-Verify. And so it's basically the agency equivalent of a toll road. And I don't have a problem with that. But here's where the problem comes in, is that if you're appropriated a lot of money and that's like a continual thing, then you have to get grilled by members of Congress about how you're spending the money. And we don't have that at the same extent that we have for other services. And so if we appropriated even like 2, 3, 4, 5% of our revenue, permanently to USCIS immigration services, you would have angry Republicans like yelling at the USCIS administrator about why they're not processing their H-1Bs fast enough.
That holds them accountable basically to Congress.
Yeah.
So right now it's just, hey, unchecked, huh? Because it's completely fee funded.
Yes.
They're like, hey,
there's some appropriation requests for additional money. It wouldn't be to the same extent if you had just like a permanent revenue stream. Right now, they just have Urgedu is just asking for money on a case by case basis, and it's not a feature. It's kind of the exception right now. But I think it'd be an improvement, though, to we're the only country in the world that just has a completely fee funded system, and that's just kind of bizarre that we operate that way.
Do you know what's the origin for like setting it up that way? Was it originally the idea that when USCIS had been set up that, or because immigration technically is sort of like an expenditure for folks who are like not Native American citizens, so it needs to be fee funded, and that's how it was decided? Like, unlike any other, it's probably one of the only government agencies that's fee funded and not run by Congress, right?
Yeah, I'm not really sure because it's a lot of U.S. citizens that are paying the fees, right? It's the employers.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So the absurd thing too is that there's this tendency to use that fee revenue to create more hurdles too, which I don't know if that's legal to even do, but they've been doing it for a long time.
The FTNS site visits and stuff like
that.
Yeah,
the FTA, exactly. FTNS stuff, doing site visits. Like, shouldn't DOL be doing that? Like, why are we paying money to have ourselves audited like this,
which is now mandatory? So
and like the other thing too is that the incentive structure is completely off if you're a USCIS employee. I've talked to a few of them, And if all you're concerned about is advancing through the ranks and earning higher salaries, you want to eventually end up in FD&S because those are the ones that get paid the most. And
Are you serious?
Yeah. FD&S gets paid the most. We've doubled the size of FD&S from, I think, 2017 to now. And a lot of those people came from USCIS, doing service work before going to FD&S. USCIS officers, their metrics, it's about how much fraud can you eliminate, or do you look like you're eliminating fraud?
They have like KPIs or something like that.
Oh, this reminds me of that Spirit or Frontier or something, right? Very recently, where they found that they used to pay people $10 if they actually find an oversized luggage, and that turned out to be a big thing in front of the congressional hearing and stuff. This sounds exactly like that.
Well, it's like the weird thing too is that USCIS officers have the ability to reject cases that look suspicious already. Like if like a 90-year-old is marrying an 18-year-old, you just like throw that case out there, right? That's not a case worth. It's not worth it. But this stuff happens. Like you find stuff like that. But if you're a USCIS officer, what you can do is say, this looks kind of suspicious. I'm going to give this to FD&S to look at this, and they do this audit on it. If you're an employer that obviously doesn't exist, they'll conduct the site visit to verify the employer doesn't exist, and then the FD&S gives it back to the USCIS officer. The USCIS officer then unpacks the findings, and it's like you're doing all of this to show that you're vigilant of fraud when you could have just thrown those cases away. You have the authority to do that, and so it's like you could be spending these time approving legitimate cases, but you're spending all this time rejecting obvious cases of fraud, and it's probably wasting FD&S. And GAO did a report showing that FD&S has these systemic sorts of policies of how to detect widespread cases of fraud and look at patterns to identify fraud. And one-off cases of USCIS officers bothering them and saying, hey, check out my fraudulent case. You're depleting resources and time away from these larger fraud detection projects. And so
it's sort of like they're more focused on the street dealers than the big guys.
Yeah, but they could focus on the street dealers very quickly without even having to go through FD&S. It just looks good for them that they go to FD&S when really they're rejecting fraud at a slower rate, and they are also spending less time adjudicating visas that are not fraudulent. So it's a lose-lose for everybody except for that one guy who's trying to look impressive. This is what I'm told by USCIS officers is like the culture of the agency.
So if there's one person who just goes through 10 applications a day and without any FCNS, he's looked down. He's like, oh, what a loser.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds to me like typical government bureaucracy bloat that, government is growing and unnecessarily obfuscating and, complicating stuff that isn't meant to be complicated.
That's why you have the Dodge father stepping in.
I know, I was coming to that. For whatever it's worth, I'm not a big fan of the name because it doesn't make it sound so official, but Doge is an interesting experiment. If, for example, you were asked, a hypothetical scenario, Elon asked you to get on Doge and fix what are the policy angles or fix through which you could improve USCIS. Well, what would your take be on something like that?
On how to fix USCIS?
Well, from a bureaucratic perspective on making things more efficient,
Yeah.
Or fixing H-1B too after that.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I mean, I can't pinpoint it down in detail. Daniel DiMartino from the Manhattan Institute did a really interesting top-down analysis on all these different forms in USCIS that don't necessarily need to be there anymore. I think he interviewed Emilio Gonzalez from the Bush administration, who I think was counsel of USCIS at the time. But for example, if you're an H-4 EAD holder, instead of waiting for the work permit, why not have a marriage certificate and other documents to verify what your status is and not why do you freaking work permit for that?
Yeah. So they already do that for the L2, right? The L2 visa, it's exactly, you don't need an EAD.
Yeah. The L2 and they're incident to status, and so that's probably why. But The law doesn't like require you to have like a work permit though. It's like you can have other, if you're not incident to status, you can use other documents to just like verify what your status is, and that's your work authorization. Like there are just a lot of unnecessary documents that don't need to be printed out. Like you have a lot of stuff. Your visa holders have so many documents to verify that they're eligible to do things.
I have an entire cupboard filled with just...
I got an entire bookshelf with the like just from the day I landed in on an F1 visa all the way up to now.
Like 10 I-20s. Yeah. And what about the H-1B system though, Sam? What would you do to fix it if you got a chance?
Oh gosh, I wish I had a better answer. And this is pie in the sky, but I mean, I don't think that we should be having a system where people are tied to their employers in such a way. I know that they're not completely tied, but it is a lot of regulatory. It's extremely cumbersome to be able to change even locations. You can still be working for the same employer, but if you change locations, that's a headache. I think that you could. There's probably, I think they're called schemio restrictions. I don't know exactly. I'm not a lawyer. I'm sure that immigration lawyers will criticize me after this show because I didn't get things 100% right, because lawyers are like that. It's very hard to switch locations on an H-1B. It's very hard to switch employers. And I think it's even weirder that for backlogged people, your pool of options on where you can like work gets even more narrow because once you get sponsored for the green card, you can only work for people with your same SOC code. And so you can only work in that specific industry. And that's insane to me. You can have a very similar job that you're doing before with similar qualifications, but if you're not like working in that, like I don't know what the codes are exactly, but if you're like the job description is data architect and not data engineer or whatever, then it's like you that job. That's insane, right? So I think that's one change I would make is I would try to make the backlogged people who are on an H-1B waiting for a green card have the same flexibility to change jobs that H-1Bs currently have. That's a small one, but I think that's one that hopefully the nativists wouldn't have a problem with because you're not increasing immigration, you're just increasing labor market flexibility. I hope they don't have a problem with that.
I think they will. Like,
yeah, probably, but like I can't imagine what their arguments are yet. So I'm a little bit optimistic because I can't anticipate what they're saying. But the thing is that all of these restrictions that prevent people from switching jobs, if anything, that does harm the overall labor market and spill over into Americans. It's true that H-1Bs and people in the green card backlog, they do make more than their American peers. However, I still think that their salary ceiling is a lot lower than it otherwise would be because of all these regulatory burdens that make them less likely to be poached by an employer and more dependent on the current employer. I mean, perm, for example, 97 days in 2019, and it's over 400 days.
460 days.
And that doesn't include prevailing wage determinations, which is like crazy, like 6 months. And it's like, and maybe Stephen Brown talked about this on the podcast too, about like the perm backlogs. But this regulation that was meant to protect the American worker from unfair competition is probably creating unfair competition by making the playing field in the employer's favor because they have this sort of subclass of people that can't change as employers more easily. So, I mean, I think they're supposed to spend like 45 days working on these applications or something like that.
And the funny thing is, I think in a court deposition, one of their like senior officers said it takes 8 minutes to adjudicate a perm. Like that's it. Like,
why are they taking only 8 minutes though? That's also like bizarre. Like, because like.
I have no idea. So apparently, like, if I remember correctly, and Stephen, if you're listening,
from a FOIA request or one of their depositions or something like that, yeah.
And no, they were stating like they're pretty much just looking to see if the application on the surface level looks good enough that the paperwork's fine and that's it.
I mean, yeah, because there is an approval after that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they've even stated like they don't even consider fraud in that review when they do it in those 8 minutes.
They put it through some automated system afterward, right? Then like it's
is it? Oh, okay.
I think that there's some technology that takes the wheel eventually, and so I don't understand what's the holdup then.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not some technology built by Google or, Apple or anything like that we know. So it's probably not great, and it's probably flagging a lot of things.
There should be some sort of congressional hearing on why this is taking so long, but instead...
these are the things we're hoping that Elon and Vivek are going to bring about at Doge.
I feel like with the DOL stuff, from what I've read about, the whole union angle plays a pretty large aspect on things. Like there's actually a fixed number of applications they need to review per day that's agreed upon in a union contract. So they have no incentive to speed things up or make it better.
I mean, think about it from an efficiency standpoint, right? You've got 6 years on an H-1B, and I actually broke down each step. Out of that, 40 months is what it takes to take that checkpoint. That's almost 41% of your time on this. How many jobs can you change? How many promotions can you accept? You're tied in there. And then everyone's like, oh, H-1Bs are this, H-1Bs and that. It's you guys don't know the harsh reality. It's like playing 3D chess, right? You got to plan everything, every move, anticipate layoffs, anticipate acquisitions or this and that, and then plan everything just to hit that I-40. 40. And then you wait 100 years.
So it takes somebody who is I would not be able to survive in a system like that. I would not, I would not pass this regulatory gauntlet. And a lot of people are like me, where they are very, very single task oriented. And so, I mean, having all these people dealing with this regulatory bureaucratic chaos for their own personal situation, and then also working a full-time job, I think that's actually insane. And I think that we're probably detracting from, you're spending all this time not doing your job, and all your personal affairs with USCIS. I think.
Why is no one talking about family-based immigration though, Sam?
It's not popular for some. To some extent, even skilled immigration is not really popular because it's all under the lens of H-1B. And I think it's an advocacy problem. The strongest advocates right now in the immigration space, can you guess who you think that they are?
Don't tell me it's U.S. tech workers.
I
don't know. Immigration Voice? I don't know.
They're not. Their Immigration Voice has had some success. I think that there are a lot of problems in their advocacy. But as I think we all probably know.
Okay. Yep.
and landscapers and all these trade associations that are frequently small businesses in rural areas. A lot of white people, frankly. And, Republicans are yeah, I want to help this farmer in my district. This is a reliable vote for me. He's an ordinary American guy. So H-2As and H-2Bs, these low skilled seasonal visas, are the most popular visa for Republicans.
Wait, you're saying they're the most prominent advocacy groups? That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. Because farmers are popular and trusted, landscapers. Because H-2B visas, the not farmer, these are people who are they run bars in Martha's Vineyard or Mackinac Island in Michigan. They need 5 H-2Bs to supplement their business for the season. It's those are very sympathetic to Republicans. And it's how do you translate that over to skilled immigration? Because H-1B right now got that Disney story from 2017. Which, that's telling about the lack of problems with the H-1B is if everyone is doing the 2017 Disney story over and over and over again. But you can't find that, or it's harder to find that entrepreneur do what that farmer's doing and saying, hey, I'm a startup. I need these workers, these international students in my area. Being able to do that would be a huge step in the right direction.
But see, that's the irony, because Silicon Valley touts everything about wanting to improve high-skilled immigration. You have so many immigrant founders who build companies, and pretty much everyone, it's surprisingly on the left and the right, they are on the same page when it comes to that. Yet inspired, and they're bloody rich, super rich billionaires and stuff. And
but none of the tech folks who are of Indian origin have actually taken a stand in this whole debate in the last few days. Maybe before, but yeah, Elon and Elon's friends and folks like that have actually taken a step. But the big names, and we're all so proud of our Indian CEOs, right? It's we make it a point to hold that card and walk that around, but we have not heard any of them say anything.
If I had a guess, I think that they want to focus on other issues, and they think that immigration is this intractable issue that's never going to get solved. And so why can't I just stop all the bad stuff happening in this emerging tech space? I think that they're probably focused on that, and because they think immigration is so hopeless. They probably might get some sort of deference from the agency we're not aware of, and favorable treatment from agencies that we're not aware of too, and that blocks real reform. A notable example that comes to mind is like TSMC, for example. They get a lot of E2 visas. TSMC, under eyes of immigration law, may not actually be considered a Taiwanese company because even though the founder is Taiwanese and they're based in Taiwan, ownership of TSMC is, I think, less than 5% from Taiwan. It's a traded company, and so U.S. or the State Department kind of like fudged the data there, or they fudged the definition of like what a Taiwanese company is, just so I can imagine stuff like that can happen in the worst case scenario for like the Elon Musks of the world, and is that they get this unspoken preferential treatment, and that impedes further reform when the big actors get what they want.
David Beer from Cato put out a tweet earlier today saying massive restrictions are on the way. Do you feel the same way for the next administration?
Oh, I have no clue. I think it depends on what they want to prioritize on. The last time around, we did see a lot of restrictions on H-1Bs, a lot of policies like prior deference, for example, which makes it so you don't have to re-adjudicate all the facts of the same case. Trump overturned that. It's going to be harder for him to overturn it this time. I frankly don't know. It depends on who he picks to run USCIS. Is he going to pick a bunch of weird people who specialize in nothing other than like a very narrow aspect of immigration law, like from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, FAIR, that want to reduce immigration? If he picks those like immigration reductionist organizations to run the agency, that's a bad sign. If he picks people that are more acquainted to economics or more acquainted to the tech space, they can have a more balanced approach there. A guy like Lee Francis Cisna, he came off as pretty restrictionist and did a lot of restrictionist things when he was heading USCIS, but he really understood how the agency worked, and under different directions, he would probably do a lot of good, I think. Maybe he would not be as pro-immigration as we would like, but he could identify ways to streamline the process. He was booted because Stephen Miller didn't like that he wasn't going fast enough on like a lot of the policies, public charge and stuff like that. But I think someone like Francis Cisna could be sort of a credible Trumpian voice that is like not hostile to immigration if given specific directions not to be. But again, how do you give those specific directions? Because Trump has a lot of policies he's focused on. The Doge people, Doug Burgum, all these other pro-immigration forces in the admin have their own other issues to focus on. And if like Trump is telling whatever, crazy person who only specializes in restricting immigration, hey, be merit focused and also eliminate fraud. Yes, sir, I'll do that. We see all these O1s from Nobel Prize winners get denied. And he's like, are you Trump doesn't see like this reporting. He goes, hey, are you eliminating fraud? Yeah, sir, we're eliminating fraud. Like, okay, great, good job. And like that's kind of what happened in the last administration.
Oh my God.
Sam, you're actually funny, man.
I don't think that Trump is like anti-skilled immigration. I just think that he has a lot of stuff to do and he can't oversee everything. And people will just act against his agenda. And it's the executive branch is such a complex place that, of course, he's not going to like see all these dynamics happening. It's like that in pretty much any sort of like political office, from House members to senators. The elected officials in charge and the staff have to be aligned on an issue for stuff to be cohesive and to get done. And if that's not there, that awareness of that lack of alignment is not there, then you're going to have an incoherent administration. And I tweeted this, my biggest concern is that Vivek and Elon Musk win the rhetorical battle of this, that immigration is good, but then they lose the actual policy battle. We're not so focused on the nitty gritty, and H-1Bs get restricted. We bring back this absurd idea of interviewing all of these green card applicants who are filing employment-based visas who've been in the country for 15 years or whatever, and we have to give them interview again when we've already interviewed them and we know everything about them. That takes like 14% of USCIS's bandwidth. And that's why we made those interviews discretionary in the first place. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope that we don't have a system where we have people intentionally throw sand in the gears of USCIS. I'm a little bit more optimistic about the Department of Labor. I think that the Department of Labor is run by people who don't see immigration as their job right now. 96 days to over 400 days for permits. Like there's something going on in the DOL. Historically, DOL is more management friendly under Republican administrations and Democratic administrations. So I can, and Lori Chavez-DeRimmer seems pretty Trump's nominee for labor secretary. She's a Republican from a blue state, lost re-election because she was in such a blue district in Oregon. But, she has voiced pretty pro-immigration things in the past. She co-sponsored Salazar's Dignity Act. So she, I think, could be a very open-minded voice on the issue. And so I see hope from the Department of Labor standpoint that there might be more reasonable people than in the Biden administration. The USCIS, I'm a little worried about. The State Department, I'm worried about. The bringing back the state side processing and having a pilot program for that was a big achievement.
That was. Yep.
Everyone's waiting for like the official announcement stating when it's going to officially start.
Yeah.
It went pretty well, I think.
It did. It was a huge success.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to get
any traction. Yeah.
But like finding ways to increase consular office capacity is going to be huge. What do we have coming up in the next few years? We've got the World Cup. We have the Olympics.
Oh, right.
And, think about like these are the biggest global events that the United States has hosted since 9/11.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and like 9/11 was why we got rid of stateside processing in the first place and had everyone go abroad. So 9/11 imposed all of these bottlenecks to international traffic that we currently don't have, and now we're hosting this global event again. If we don't find ways to increase capacity soon, the World Cup and the Olympics are what's going to happen there with visa traffic? Are we going to have to like siphon off resources from international students and scientists coming here?
I didn't think of that. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Maybe we can strategically deny competitors visas.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's the US playing there next week? Oh, okay, fine.
We want every medal out there. You guys remember The Dictator? The movie where he's running the race.
I remember. Yeah,
he just runs back and anyone's beating him. He just like shoots him. And he's like, yeah.
So these are like people talk about the Dreamer crisis. That that DACA is going to get rescinded, but that's just one inflection point. The Olympics, the World Cup. These are things that policymakers and DHS, Department of State, are really going to have to think about.
Have they not thought about it yet? Because it's like right around the corner, right?
Maybe they are, but like, look at the capacity as it is, though. It's a hellhole in India again. The lease is renewed. If they are thinking about it, it's not showing right now. We should have OIG and GAO reports on this, because the last thing we want is for
chaos.
Or for a terrorist attack, or like.
Oh, I didn't even think that far. I was just thinking about people not getting their visas in time.
Yeah, these are all collected. Like again, there's a national security risk for people worried about national security, because we don't want like another 9/11 to happen. And there's also scientists not getting their visas renewed, international students not, like, these are two different risks that we have to tackle. I think we can. If you see how outdated our immigration system is, USCIS still relying on USPS, sending out
1,000-page documents.
Yeah, saying, hey, please don't pull punch your documents because we upload them to our computer. Guess what? Great news, guys. You can actually pay digitally now.
Someone posted this, Sam, on Twitter. Like, we type the document on the printer, we print it out, we send it to them, they rescan it, and then upload it to the computer. It's the age of AI, right? This is how we get our applications approved.
We have great institutions everywhere, and we are the land of dynamism in a lot of ways, but it's crazy that our immigration system is like this direct, like, contrast to everything America is supposed to stand for as far as like dynamism is concerned. We have this 1990s. I don't know if it's still the case, but a few years ago, immigration lawyers were saying for certain petitions they have to like download an app to read faxes. And so because the USCIS still has like fax machines in certain parts for like certain petitions. I mean, this isn't just bad service. This is a national security risk to have a system run like this. Like this is appalling and unacceptable. Like we landed on the moon a long time ago. We should be. I don't know. It's appalling that we tried to modernize USCIS before. We haven't succeeded for some reason. I don't know what's achievable. I think something will be achievable. We have a lot of optimism from Elon Musk and others, and a lot of yearning to agitate the status quo. And that's what we need to, I think, harness. For any viewers, I think, calling your member of Congress, getting involved, organizing your own organic fly-ins, trying to get on local news. There's a lot of things you can do. Don't leave it to the immigration advocacy groups to just get involved, because there's a reason why they haven't gotten anything done yet. Either they're coming off too aggressively and hostile. We know the groups that are doing that. And it's not just, it's not just Immigration Voice too. United We Dream is a big.
Oh, I've never heard of this org.
They're the farm workers and group and all that, right?
United We Dream. Well, United Farm Workers, I have a lot of problems with. I don't think they should be in the room, but they can be amenable to they supported the Farm Workforce Modernization Act and stuff like that. But United We Dream is purely a partisan organization that only appeals to Democrats. I have not mentioned Improve the Dream, but we all know Improve the Dream. They are very disciplined. They talk with members, get to know members, and they're very skilled at turning no's into yeses. But you don't have to be a part of any group to be able to do that. I think going to coffees with, members will have coffees with Chuck Grassley or something like that. And so just meeting your members and talking about this issue, inviting your friends to talk about it too. We need more of that, because the anti-immigrant groups are always on the phones calling about any obscure legislation getting introduced. Wow. And so we need to have a counterforce to that. And so, that's the people listening in on this podcast, so.
Oh, it was great.
I know. It was a lot to digest.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I probably got to go back and listen to it just so that I can, think about some more stuff on what you've talked about, Sam. It's quite a bit stuff we need to definitely look into.
I think Sam has given us a lot to think on.
And thanks once again, Sam. I know we had a few network issues and stuff, but thanks for joining back.
Thanks, Seth, for everything you've been doing for us. I mean, every data point that you provide, every post that you make, it really goes a long way in actually writing the narrative. Because like how I said in the start, right, there's a lot of false narratives going around. And you, David Beer from Cato, you guys are the few voices that actually point us in the right direction. And it means a lot. So thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And I hope that we can be even more effective going into this administration too.
Thanks for calling in. And hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast very soon.
Thanks again for having me and for tolerating the rural Missouri network issues I've been dealing with.
It's all good.
It's all good.
Well, that was another long and interesting episode.
I know. Sam's an encyclopedia and all this immigration stuff.
Dude, he's so much info. He shared a lot, and this is going to be one episode where I'm going to definitely sit and play it back 3-4 times to just process everything that he said, because a lot of cool tidbits here and there. He casually dropped a lot of truth bombs, and I was like, whoa!
Exactly. The whole Olympics thing and visa stuff. Dude. That's a year away. We're in 2025 now, effectively, and it's happening in 2026. So.
And to be honest, until he actually spelled it out, I didn't even consider the security threat. I was thinking more from a logistics standpoint, hey, will people get visas and, enough appointment slots? But yeah, you're right. You're going to get a huge influx of people for those two events into the country, right? So are we equipped to deal with it?
Oh, but the way things are right now.
And it's unfortunately an administration change as well, right? So there's going to be a few months where, people are being moved around, new people fitting in and settling into the new jobs and stuff. So you've got to take into account that inertia before you actually get things running as well. So
yeah, exactly.
But it's a super informative episode, I felt. And the reason we actually put this together is because there's a lot of narratives going around on X. Everyone has an opinion on this. And unfortunately, a lot of the data points that they're using to justify whether an H-1B is harmful or useful are not the right data points that should be used, which is why we thought we'll get someone who actually knows what he's talking about to break it down for us. Like, is it actually harming the country or is it actually helping? And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. Sam's more than happy to come back on another episode to actually address those questions.
Yep.
Reach out to us on X, on LinkedIn, Instagram, any platform that you use, and we'll be more than happy to address those questions.
Yeah, and I know he didn't mention it, but like if you guys are on X, you can follow him. His handle is Speak Samuel. I'm not sure if he's active on LinkedIn, but
he is. Yeah.
Oh, he is. Okay. So he's an amazing analyst. Like, puts out really good, very informative thought pieces. So yeah, definitely worth a follow if you're interested in this stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks for staying with us till the end. See you at the next episode.
Take care, folks.